At 5:30 in the morning, most people are asleep. The streets are quiet. The world hasn't woken up yet. But on July 31st, 2022, in the quiet suburb of Strongsville, Ohio, something was about to happen that would shock an entire nation, divide the internet in two, and send a 17-year-old girl to prison for the rest of her life. Two young men got into a car that morning. They would never get out. Now here's the question that has haunted this case from the very beginning, and the one we are going to answer today. Was the crash that killed Dominic, Russo, and Davion Flanagan a horrific accident? Or was it cold, calculated, premeditated murder carried out by the very person sitting behind the wheel, a girl who was supposed to love one of them? Because here's what we know. The car hit that brick wall at 100 miles per hour. The brakes were never touched, not once. And Mackenzie Shirilla, the only one who walked away, had a story that didn't quite add up. But before you make up your mind, you need to hear everything. The relationship, the secrets, the evidence, the courtroom. Because nothing about this case is as simple as it looks, and by the time we're done, you'll understand exactly why a judge looked a 17-year-old girl dead in the eyes and said, "This was not reckless driving. This was murder." Stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. To understand what happened on that summer morning, you first need to understand who these people were. Because this isn't just a story about a crash. It's a story about a relationship, one that people close to it described as obsessive, volatile, and deeply troubling. Mackenzie Shirilla grew up in Strongsville, Ohio, a quiet middle-class suburb just outside of Cleveland. By all outward appearances, she was a regular teenage girl. She had friends, she went to school, she had a family that loved her. But those who knew her well painted a more complicated picture. Mackenzie had an intensity about her, a possessiveness that made people uncomfortable. And nowhere was that more apparent than in her relationship with Dominic Russo. Dominic was 20 years old, charismatic, well-liked, the kind of guy who lit up a room when he walked in. His family adored him, his friends loved him, and Mackenzie was completely consumed by him. The two had been dating, and from early on, people around them noticed things weren't quite right. Prosecutors would later describe the relationship as toxic, marked by jealousy, tension, and control. There were arguments, there were threats, there were moments that made people around them deeply uneasy. But young love has a way of blinding people to the warning signs. And so, things continued. Then there was Davion Flanagan, 19 years old, a friend to both of them. By every account, Davion was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a young man whose only mistake was being present on the wrong morning in the wrong car, with the wrong person behind the wheel. He had nothing to do with whatever tension existed between Mackenzie and Dominic. He was just there, and that detail alone makes this story all the more devastating. In the weeks leading up to July 31st, people close to the couple sensed things were deteriorating. The relationship had grown more strained, more unpredictable. What exactly was said, what was threatened, what was felt in those final days, we may never fully know. But what we do know is this. In the early hours of that Sunday morning, Mackenzie Shirilla got behind the wheel of her Toyota Camry with Dominic in the passenger seat and Davion in the back. And whatever was going on inside that car, whatever words were spoken, whatever emotions were boiling over, none of it would matter in just a few minutes. Because at 5:30 a.m. everything changed. The streets of Strongsville were empty at that hour. No witnesses, no other cars, just the hum of an engine in the early morning darkness, and three young people inside a Toyota Camry going somewhere, or perhaps going nowhere at all. Surveillance footage later captured what happened next, and when investigators reviewed that footage, what they saw didn't look like an accident. It didn't look like panic. It didn't look like a driver who had lost control. What it looked like, what it undeniably, chillingly looked like, was intention. The car accelerated, not gradually, not casually. It accelerated with purpose, climbing in speed at a rate that made no sense for the road it was on. 60 miles per hour, 70, 80, and still the foot on the pedal didn't ease up. 90 miles per hour, then 100 on a surface street, in a quiet neighborhood, at 5:30 in the morning. And then the wall. A brick wall on the side of a commercial building. Solid, immovable, the kind of structure that doesn't give way. The Toyota Camry slammed into it at full speed, 100 miles per hour with absolutely no attempt to brake. Not a skid mark on the ground. Not a trace of deceleration. Nothing. Just full speed and then impact. The force of the collision was catastrophic. Dominic Russo, 20 years old, sitting in the passenger seat next to the girl he was in a relationship with, was killed instantly. Davion Flanagan, 19 years old, seated in the back, never had a chance either. Both young men were pronounced dead at the scene. 2 lives, extinguished in a single, violent moment before the sun had even risen. Mackenzie Shirilla survived. Seriously injured, she was pulled from the wreckage and rushed to the hospital. And here is where the story takes yet another haunting turn, because when police began to piece together what had happened, the absence of brake marks wasn't the only thing that troubled them. It was Mackenzie's behavior in the aftermath. Bodycam footage from her arrest showed a young woman who was tearful, but investigators and those who watched the footage closely noted something that felt deeply off. Something that didn't sit right. Her reaction seemed performed, calculated. The grief didn't feel like grief. And a fellow inmate who would later share a facility with Mackenzie after her conviction put it even more bluntly. She said Mackenzie showed no remorse. None. Not in private. Not when the cameras were gone and no one was watching. But feelings and impressions, no matter how powerful, are not evidence. To build a murder case against a 17-year-old girl, to convince a court that this was not a terrible accident but a deliberate act of killing, prosecutors needed more. They needed to go deeper. They needed to look inside the relationship between Mackenzie Shirilla and Dominic Russo. And what they found there would become the backbone of one of the most disturbing prosecutions Ohio had seen in years. Because it turns out, the morning of July 31st didn't happen in isolation. It was the end of something that had been building for a long time. And the closer investigators looked, the darker the picture became. In a courtroom in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, the weight of everything, the surveillance footage, the skid marks that never existed, the testimony, the text messages, the history of a troubled relationship, all of it came to rest on the shoulders of one woman, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo. And what she was being asked to decide was not a simple question. She was being asked to look into the heart of a 17-year-old girl and determine whether what lived there was grief or guilt. Mackenzie Shirilla had opted for a bench trial, meaning there would be no jury. No 12 strangers deliberating behind a closed door, just one judge, one mind, one verdict. The prosecution laid out their case with surgical precision. They argued that the crash was not the result of recklessness, not the product of a bad decision made in a reckless moment, but a premeditated act of murder. They pointed to the speed, 100 miles per hour on a surface street. They pointed to the absence of any braking, not a single moment where Mackenzie's foot moved from the accelerator to the brake pedal. They pointed to the trajectory of the car, deliberate and unwavering, aimed directly at a solid brick wall with no deviation, no correction, no last-second attempt to swerve away. They argued that a person who accidentally loses control of a vehicle panics. They swerve, they brake, they fight the wheel. Mackenzie Shirilla did none of those things. And then they went deeper, into the relationship, into the text messages between Mackenzie and Dominic that painted a picture of something combustible and dangerous. Prosecutors described the relationship as increasingly toxic, riddled with jealousy, possessiveness, and volatility. They suggested that Mackenzie, facing the potential end of her relationship with Dominic, had made a decision. A terrifying, irreversible decision. If she couldn't have him, then no one would. Davion Flanagan, in this theory, was collateral damage. A young man who had done absolutely nothing wrong, whose only connection to any of this was that he was a friend who happened to be in the backseat. And that reality, that a 19-year-old boy lost his life simply because he was present, is perhaps the most devastating thread running through this entire case. The defense pushed back. Mackenzie's attorneys argued there was no concrete proof of intent. They pointed out that accidents happen, that cars malfunction, that young drivers make fatal errors. Her mother, Natalie Shirilla, was unwavering in her belief that her daughter was innocent, insisting that Mackenzie would never deliberately harm the people she loved. "Look at the evidence critically and objectively," Natalie said publicly, "and you will see there is no evidence of intent. She never threatened his life." The family spoke of a first lawyer who they believed failed to present crucial evidence, and they vowed with the kind of fierce, unrelenting determination that only a mother can carry to never stop fighting. "I will never, ever, never stop," Natalie said. "There is no expiration on truth." But Judge Nancy Margaret Russo had heard everything. She had reviewed the footage. She had studied the data. She had listened to both sides with the careful, measured attention that a case of this magnitude demanded. And on August 14, 2023, she delivered her verdict. Guilty on all counts, 12 felony charges, 4 counts of murder, felonious assault, aggravated vehicular homicide, drug possession, possessing criminal tools, every single charge guilty. And then, before announcing the sentence, Judge Russo looked at Mackenzie Shirilla and said the words that would echo across the internet, across news broadcasts, across millions of dinner-table conversations for years to come. Words that were quiet and precise and absolutely devastating in their clarity. This was not reckless driving, this was murder. Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Her driver's license was suspended for life. She was led out of that courtroom and taken to the Ohio Reformatory for Women, where she remains to this day. She was 17 years old when she got into that car. She was 19 when a judge took away her freedom. And Dominic, Russo, and Davion Flanagan, 2 young men who woke up on the morning of July 31, 2022, with no reason to believe it would be their last, never got to grow older at all. The case has since become the subject of a Netflix documentary called The Crash, which shot straight to #1 on the platform, proof that the world is still grappling with this story, still searching for answers, still asking the question that may never be fully resolved. Was Mackenzie Shirilla a cold-blooded killer who used a car as a weapon? Or is there something more to this story that we haven't yet seen? What we know for certain is this: 2 families were destroyed that morning. A mother who lost her son, a sister who lost her brother, a community that lost 2 of its young, and somewhere in a prison in Ohio, a young woman who says she is innocent continues to wait for an appeal, for a second chance, for someone to believe her. Whether that day ever comes, only time will tell. Before you go, I need you to sit with something for a moment. 2 young men got into a car at 5:30 in the morning. They trusted the person behind the wheel, and they never came home. Whether you believe Mackenzie Shirilla is a cold-blooded murderer who made a calculated decision to end 2 lives, or whether you believe she is a teenager who has been catastrophically misunderstood by a system that failed her, one thing is beyond dispute. Dominic, Russo, and Davion Flanagan are gone. They were 20 and 19 years old. They had entire lives ahead of them, dreams they never got to chase, people who loved them who will carry that loss for the rest of their lives. And no verdict, no documentary, no YouTube video, including this one, will ever give those families back what was taken from them on that July morning. That is the part of true crime that we must never forget. Behind every case number, behind every court transcript, behind every viral headline, there are real people, real pain, real absence. Now I want to hear from you, because this case has split public opinion right down the middle since the very beginning. Do you believe the judge got it right? Was this murder deliberate, premeditated, and calculated? Or do you think there is reasonable doubt that has been buried under the weight of public outrage? Drop your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video made you think, made you feel, made you see this story differently, then do me one favor, share it. Because Dominic, Russo, and Davion Flanagan deserve to be more than a trending topic. They deserve to be remembered. And the truth, whatever it fully is, deserves to be heard. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button because this is what we do on this channel. We don't just tell you what happened. We make you feel it. We make you question it. We make you think about it long after the video ends. And trust me, the next case we're covering, you will not see it coming. I'll see you there.